For the last 3 years, between recording segments of the D6 generation, Russ, Craig, and Rafe have had various conversations that have spanned the interests of gamerdom worldwide. This is one of those conversations.
D6G, The Lost Chapters.
Hey, welcome back to Dunkin' Donuts. And now, of course, we actually have with us a guy who can go to Dunkin' Donuts with us as much as he wants, because there's about 100 of them in every town in New England.
Dan is sitting next to me now, and he has a cup of Dunkin' Donuts. Was that hot chocolate, Dan?
This is a large hot chocolate.
As big as my head?
Why wouldn't I have a cup of hot chocolate? We're sitting in Dunkin' Donuts.
We are.
Can I have a vanilla chai after
Russ
this
just
one?
pulled the curtain back.
And what do you, where's that box of Munchkins? You had the Munchkins.
Oh, yeah, I got those right here.
What'd you get? What kind did you get there?
I got the leftovers because it's nighttime.
Right, it's the dregs.
I got glazed chocolate and jelly.
Oh,
those are always the ones that are left.
Well, there were the glazed chocolate. Those aren't bad.
Yeah, they're good.
Those are good.
The jelly, the jelly was surprisingly fresh.
Okay, good.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, anyway, so the three of us, Russ recently read Hunger Games.
I did.
Because he listened to it. I remember back in the day when you would just say you read it.
I just want to be clear. I enjoy Audible, so so I did that. Get the plug in there.
There you go. Yeah, I was going to say. Now it's pluggable. Now we admit that we listen to
Oh,
things.
yes.
But anyway.
I actually purchased my copy of Hunger Games that I recently finished reading at Myriad Games. So there you go.
Nicely done, sir.
Okay.
Well played.
All right. Well, anyway.
Okay.
So I've been a big fan for a while. Actually, I started reading them, I think a couple of years ago.
Right.
And then I finally got Russ to. Russ caved in. A bunch of us had read it and begged him to read it. And Dan read recently his copy that he got at Myriad Games. And of course, the movie is coming out very soon. I believe the movie comes out in March.
March 23rd,
Yeah,
2012.
Yeah,
Mere months away.
So this is very timely. So we're going to do another book club, which we haven't done in a while.
People seem to enjoy them. Why not?
Yeah,
We do like to read.
We do like to read.
Or
and
listen.
so we're going to talk today about The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins.
Ah.
Now, I should clarify here, there will be spoilers. However, I would appreciate if there would be no spoilers of the next two books, because I have not read them yet.
I haven't either, so we will only be spoiling the first book.
So unless you annoy me, then it will be spoiler-free for the next two books. Otherwise,
Right.
I'll tell you how the whole thing ends.
All right.
I bet there's some teen angst involved.
I think.
In the second two, there's going to be teen angst. Come on. They avoided it in the first one pretty well.
They did a great
That was
job.
by
So
killing
anyway,
everyone.
So, Craig, do you want to summarize the wonderful world of, what is the wonderful world called?
Well, it's a very dystopian world, really. The
It
Hunger
is.
Games takes place in a dystopian future.
Mm-hmm.
It takes place in a city-state, basically, that covers most of what we would call North America, and it's called Panem, which I always thought was like Pan America, but
Yeah.
who knows? It's just called Panem, or also could be bread. That for bread.
It's actually based on, I was reading some background on this, and it's actually based on a Greek myth. It's based on Theseus or something.
Oh, no, that's a little literary reference. Ooh, look at that. Well, who knew?
I am just finishing teaching a mythology segment right now, and I am unaware. But okay.
Okay.
So anyway, the structure of Panem is very cool because you have a very high-tech sci-fi city called the Capitol, and that's somewhere in the Rockies.
Very high tech. They have self-cloaking hovercraft and all kinds of craziness.
Yeah, I mean, they've got super, super high-tech sci-fi stuff.
Right.
And then you've got 12 currently districts, each of which is separated by its job in supporting the capital and then the rest of the districts. For instance, you've got an agricultural district, you have a seafood district. Is the District 12, is that where she comes from?
District 12 is where the main character comes from.
Yeah, District 12, which is the coal district. So it's not New England, but it's sort of close there, like Pennsylvania and a little bit south in that area there.
Yeah,
Because
specifically
New England,
Appalachia.
Yeah, I thought it was
Yeah.
West Virginia. That's where I kind of got the feeling.
Right.
Coal miners, baby.
Right. Never mind. Okay. District 13, which is where New England would be, is
Right.
actually a devastated nuclear wasteland.
Right.
Because there was at one point a rebellion, which is key to the whole plot. And sometime in the past, was it 80 years ago or so, District 13 rose up and fought against the Capitol. Everybody actually rose up with them. There was a big rebellion. The Capitol has all the super high-tech weapons, including awesome genetically designed like killer animals and all kinds of other cool stuff. And then, unfortunately, of course, the districts had the numbers, but they were getting beaten back, and then eventually the Capitol completely nuked District 13, wiped it off the planet, subjugated all of the others, beat them into the ground, and then to make sure that they knew who was boss, they instituted this concept called the Hunger Games, which is basically what the whole story revolves around.
Right. And so I guess the first about third of the book is targeting sort of get you up into how the universe works, right? So they kind of build up the district, and they sort of zoom into District 12. The coal mining district, and start following the adventures of Katniss, who is the main character, a young, 16-year-old girl?
16, yeah.
16-year-old. Everybody in District 12, or almost everybody in District 12 is poor, but she's particularly poor because her dad was killed in a mining accident.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no workers' comp in this scenario.
Well, you can tell everybody, it's a feudal society almost, right? Everybody's very, very hungry all the time. Even the merchants in the town, they just have enough food to get by. Everything's barter. It's not high tech. At first, when you first start reading the book, you're not really aware how high tech the capital is. You just know there's this capital, and slowly it starts to trickle out that you're dealing with a girl, the main character. She's out hunting in the woods every day with a bow. And she's skinning animals, and they're eating stew, and even there's a baker. It's very you're not really even sure what era you're in. It could be anything, and then all of a sudden things start happening. You get those little glimmers, just how much more advanced and it's almost like the capital's at a level of magic beyond them in terms of their technology.
And there's that constant Big Brother thing going on too. There's an electric fence that goes all the way around.
Yep.
The residential elements of the district, and that because of the power outages, they can't have it on all the time, but it's on almost all the time to keep people out because they don't want you out in the countryside. They want you very controlled and limited to where they can watch you, and then you learn that relatively early on in the book. There's a scene where somebody's just trying to escape, and this hovercraft comes and gets them, and you're like, oh, holy crap, there's somebody out there with a hovercraft.
Yeah, and I think they're also not allowed to hunt or poach, right? Because they want to control what you eat. Yeah. And so they're sneaking out Katniss and
Gale.
And her best friend
Gale, who's a boy, is a little older than her. They're going out into the woods daily and hunting, and that's how she's providing for her family, because even though it's technically a death sentence, I believe, to be caught hunting, most of the guards, because food's so scarce and protein's so scarce, she can come in and she can trade what she hunts for, squirrels or even something better like a rabbit or even occasional deer. She can trade that in and get lots and lots of, trade it to the baker and get bread. She can trade it to the town watch who's supposed to be reporting her, but they'll look the other way and actually give her money
to the mayor
for the food, to the mayor. So it's kind of a known thing, at least in District 12. It's kind of known that, there are people who go out there and hunt. Her dad was kind of known as a hunter, too, and that's where she learned all of her skills from. You hunt, we know it's wrong, but we're so hungry, too, we'll gladly trade you and kind of look the other way for those kind of things.
There's a whole black market in the town that's built around trading things that you're not necessarily supposed to trade.
Right. So what do you guys think of the beginning? How was the ramp up of the story from kind of meeting Katniss to learning her life to where it got to pick up and you guys started learning about the reaping and the Hunger Game part?
I thought they did a good job of the pacing throughout the book is pretty good, but then in this particular section, it's really introducing you to the characters as much as it is to the world.
Right.
You're going to have, they know, you don't know yet necessarily, but they know that you're going to have this dramatic acceleration in technology where you go from the baker doesn't have good bread to eat, all the way to, we replicated whatever fancy meal you wanted to eat just on a whim. And that is much more effective because of the beginning of the book, where it takes, I don't know how many chapters, it doesn't feel like that long, to introduce you to all the characters, to show you how desperate they are, to introduce you to the entire backstory of the main character, Katniss, about how her family, her mother's basically a wreck, her younger sibling, her younger sister, Primrose, is very kind of brave, almost braver than she is in a lot of ways, but also very delicate, and she's all about like protecting her. But basically, she's become the breadwinner in this family once her father died, because her father or her mother just fell apart entirely. So I feel like it does a good job of grinding you into the dirt, so that you can then feel yourself being raised out of the dirt and into this. It's this very weird feeling, and we'll get into that a little more throughout the book, but it's a very weird feeling because you're following. It's from is this from a first-person perspective? Am I remembering that right? Or is it second? Or it definitely focuses on Katniss, like the whole time.
It always is from Katniss's point of view, I think. But
it must be third person, though.
But I think it's third person. Yeah, she never talks about her. It's not like I.
But you never see. It's not like in
no.
This
it's
chapter,
written in first person.
Is it first person?
It's
okay,
first person.
Yeah,
and you never see like you never. The camera never leaves her, right? So it's like
no, it never leaves her.
If she's unconscious, you don't know anything until you find out later.
Yes.
What happened from some other person that she
like when she gets separated from PETA. You never see what PETA does without her there, except when she later. Well, I'm jumping ahead when she watches it. Yeah. So like, there's never. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Craig, you're right. It's first person, and it also is always on her. So it does follow Katniss's adventures. But she talks, she also, so the entire story's from her perspective.
So I think in order for that to work, you have to take that time to get to know the character that you're going to be following this entire book.
Yeah. But then what they use later on is they use technology so that Katniss can see things happening in other places, and that's how you get narration about things that are happening in other areas.
Well, they came up with. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You quit.
Well, I just wanted to back up 2 points. Dan's point about they did a great job with setting up the technology level and the dichotomy between how the districts live, and then you really do. You're sort of like, because you're in Kat's eyes all the time. You really do feel like, wow, it is. You do see, and they show you such little slivers of what the Capitol can actually do from the beginning. Like, oh, they have nice televisions, they have crappy, and all of a sudden you start realizing, holy crap, they can do this. Holy crap, they can do. Oh my God, they're like, they're almost like at the level of like, the Empire and Star Wars kind of technology level. At some point, you're like,
it's almost like Star Trek.
Yeah, it's almost like, and you're like, whoa, these guys are living, and so you really suddenly you really get to see her journey and get to appreciate, and you're with her scrapping for food for so long, and all of a sudden there's this extravagant luxury in the Capitol. You really get with her and be with it.
But that narrative arc is so interesting because they put you up into this, and the whole time that she is experiencing this, she knows that she's going to be tossed back into this barbaric arena.
Knows where she's going.
And she's just like, well, I might as well enjoy this now, before I start, not having any food to eat again. But it's not a surprise because you saw that at the beginning of the narrative cycle.
Right. And I loved the beginning of the book because I love character-driven stories, and the characters here are so well-rounded and so three-dimensional. But I also love the way that Suzanne Collins sets you up, where you, as you said, Russ, you don't really know what era you're talking about. They're coal mining, which would suggest something relatively modern at least.
Right.
But they're living this feudal system where they're living in these huts, and they're cold in the wintertime all the time, and they're dreading the approach of winter, and then you get these glimpses like the hovercraft that comes in after the runaway, and you get these glimpses of big giant TVs, and it just, the way that the futuristic elements are slowly fed to you in this shocking way that contrasts with the way they're living is, I thought, extremely well done, extremely well paced, and I, right off the bat, right within the first chapter, I was completely hooked on the characters. So I was very excited to see them take the journey that they were on.
Yeah, and the other thing they start feeding to you slowly, in addition to like what the Capitol can do and what their deal is this idea of what the reaping is and what the Hunger Games are. They don't just come out and say, she doesn't come out and say in the beginning of the book, the Hunger Games are this. There's sort of this little trivial of like, oh, the reaping's coming. Oh, it's sort of a bittersweet time. We're getting ready to celebrate, but they're not really celebrating anything, in fact. And so, Craig, how does the reaping all work?
Well, the reaping is phenomenal. Well, it's right out of the lottery, really. It's a lottery, and basically every district must offer up one boy and one girl between the ages of, 12 and 18, I believe.
Yeah.
And basically, you get your name in the big tumbler. You get it once for every year that you're alive. So you're so it's more likely that you're going to have older tributes, the people that have to go and fight. But you can also, I thought this was an awesome thing. You can basically get money for your family and food for your family by putting your name in more often.
Right.
So the poor so it's a very interesting view of this. So the rich people are less likely to be chosen, and the poor people are more likely to be chosen because you've got to put your name in there to feed your family.
Right.
And so basically what happens is they're going to pick a boy and a girl between the ages of 12 and 18. Every district's going to have them, so there's going to be 24 tributes total, 12 boys, 12 girls, and they're going to be brought to the capital to begin their training for this big, basically free-for-all, super combat, Hunger Games extravaganza.
You don't know what it's going to be, but they do once they reveal the fact that there's this tribute concept and that the whole process is Katniss basically says that it's subjugation by the capital to realize how powerless you are, that you must give up your children to be basically killed. Right. And they tell
not
you
only that, but you must celebrate.
I get it. That's Theseus.
Right. That's Theseus.
Yeah.
You get that part.
Right.
Yeah. Katniss is supposed to be Theseus in the background of this, and so
because she volunteers. Yeah.
It's so it's not. Oh, hey, they force people to watch this. It's not like, hey, we're just going to take your kids and then you can forget about it. It's like, oh, it's a big celebration. This is the only celebration you have all year long. And it's this big thing about us reminding you that we can take your children and kill them whenever we want.
Right. And not only that, the districts all have to sort of celebrate. They all have to get excited about it. They have to all be in the town square watching it on these big TVs. There are these, well-dressed announcers come down from the Capitol and like, isn't this wonderful? It's the reaping. And everybody gets supposedly excited about it. Meanwhile, in the Capitol, this whole event is like the Super Bowl for them. They all watch it. They all get excited about it. They all bet on who's going to win. There's lavish parade. It's almost like the Olympics. It's just this huge deal. And to them, it's just like this fun thing to watch. And meanwhile, these families are biting their nails and worried sick that their kid is going to get chosen for this event, and in all likelihood come back dead because they set up right from the beginning in the Hunger Games, only one person gets out alive.
Right.
And everybody else is dead. And the thing that's really bad about it is the two people from your district are, even those two people, one of them, you don't win as a team, it's one person gets out alive. And I think the deal was that you get one ticket in there for every year you're eligible. So when you're 12 years old, you don't get 12 tickets, you get one ticket in there. And then when you're 13, you get 2 tickets and so on. And you can buy more. But what's crazy about that is what actually happens to Katniss, right? So the reaping comes, and everybody's standing in the town square.
Now, keep in mind, she has maximized her risk.
She is 16 now. Yeah. She's got a lot in there. She's been maximized to her family. Her younger sister, who she calls Prim, who she loves, takes care of her, protects her, as Dan mentioned earlier, she just turned 12 this year. Her name is in the bucket exactly once because that's her first time, and that's all she's got in there. So the odds against her being picked are very, very small. And then she's got her best buddy, Gale, who is 18. She's nervous for him, too, and he's got a bunch of tickets in there also.
Because he is kind of maxed out as well.
Yes,
because he's used everything he can. But she specifically, Katniss, has never allowed Primrose to use her option.
Right.
She's always said, I will not let you do that. I will hunt more. I will use mine. I will not let you have this chance. To the point where they're not even worried about her. They're just like,
they were just really low.
You have the same chances as the mayor's daughter is the whole joke.
Right.
Is that like, oh, you're never going to get picked.
Right. But of course, they reach into the bucket and they pull out a name, and guess whose name is picked?
Primrose Everdeen.
It's Prim. And now you don't even know this going into this scene, but it's actually loud that someone else can volunteer in that person's stead. And I don't think we even knew that when it happened.
No, I don't think
we
did.
You're like, oh my God, it's her sister. She's so screwed. And then Katniss starts to walk forward, and you're thinking, what is she going to do? And then it turns out you can sort of say, I'll go in this person's stead. And in fact, in some of the districts, we learn that families train their children from a young age to fight, and it's a great honor. So some of the districts, especially the districts that are more closer in technology to the capital, because some of the districts produce textiles and they're more advanced. So those guys are like training their kids to be warriors, and they'll actually step in and choose over the other person to make sure the district's got a good fighter. And some of the districts are more favored to win every year because of those kinds of things.
Yeah, the lower the number, the closer you are to the capital, and the more allied to them philosophically you are.
Right.
It's like 1, 2, 3. I think 6 was another one.
Yeah,
So
another big one.
Yeah.
But
So
like 12 is the end of the line. You're
Yeah.
over here in Appalachia. You're super far away. You're
Right.
super destitute, and you are super unskilled. Nobody's training you for this.
Right.
Right.
So she steps in the way for her sister and says, I want to go instead. And also, the boy chosen from the district, who is PETA, and we learn a little backstory about PETA. PETA actually is someone who did a nice favor for Katniss when she
When
needed
they
it
were
most.
little.
And so she had a sort of never really a crush on him, but she always sort of knew of him and felt he was a nice guy. So when he got picked
She doesn't think of him as a nice guy, but she seems to think every time she turns around and sees him, he's looking at her.
right. So she
And
right.
and she thinks it's because when he was little and he was supposed to be throwing out this bread that landed on the floor, and instead he gave it to her. And she's in her head thinking that he's thinking like, oh, there's that poor girl that I gave that bread to. Oh, she's gross. Little do you know.
Right. So exactly. So they both get picked, and that's pretty much the end of sort of the first part of the book, where we get through to, okay, we've established what District 12 is like. We know Katniss's background. We know who PETA is. Gale is really a secondary character at this point. I mean, we know that she's a friend of his and that she's really close to him, but she's never really into romance yet. There's no romance going on here at all.
I feel like
There's no romance. Well, we'll talk about that in a bit.
I feel like there's more. Do they actually lay out the book like that? It's like book 1, book 2, book 3. Am I remembering that wrong? Or I feel like there is a very clear delineation. Like you feel when you're like, okay, this part of the book is done. Now we're going to this next phase where she's going.
Yes,
off to
it's
the
broken
capital.
down. Yeah, it's broken down. Book 1, book 2. Yeah, like that.
That's pretty much the end of book 1. So we're moving on to. So we already talked about how we liked. So pretty much we liked how they set it up and the low tech thing and everything. Mm-hmm. So then you get into where book 2 starts, which is really in the same book, just sort of chapters, into the pregame training. So this is kind of interesting and a surprise too, where they started. You start realizing, and you start meeting some of the other crazy characters in the book. Like who's the crazy lady who sort of manages the team from District 12?
Effie Trinket.
Effie Trinket, who's this sort of. She comes off as sort of this affectatious airhead, but yet she's still. You can tell that she's politically savvy, and she kind of knows what's going on.
You know what she reminds me of? Dolores Umbridge from Harry Potter.
A little bit, but she's not quite as evil and dark as Dolores.
No,
right?
just like
her
that prim and
affectation's
proper
that way.
and
Yes.
very rude, but like
Yes.
proper at the same time. It's weird.
I'm so glad you brought up Harry Potter here. Because this book is just like Harry Potter. Not really. Except for the part where they go to the Capitol. It's kind of like when they go to Hogwarts for the first time. No, just
So they go
kidding,
through a
joking.
train
They
platform.
do ride a train.
They do ride a train. And they are children, you know. So the other person we sort of meet here, who becomes sort of an interesting character, but in the beginning you kind of think he's sort of this ancillary dude, which is Haymitch.
Hamish Abernathy. He has such a
Right.
great name.
So the other thing we learn is that if you do happen to win the Hunger Games and come out the victor, you're pretty much set for life.
You get to be a drunkard.
Every district has its
That's what we
own.
want.
Yeah, every district has its own like one little cul-de-sac. Kind of in my mind, I imagine it this way, of these really, really high-end houses, and the winner of the games comes back to their home district, gets one of these cool houses and lots of money and food and whatever. And they're pretty much living like a king, right?
It's
for the rest of
it's
their life.
the loneliest rich neighborhood.
It's the reward. Well, the problem is District 12 is only won once, right? or a couple times,
In
but the
like
only
73 years.
the only living guy is Haymitch Abernathy, and he comes off at this point in the book as just a total drunkard, nincompoop almost.
He doesn't
right?
really care.
Literally,
Right.
his introduction is he's so drunk. They
falls
come
off
up.
the stage.
They're like, and congratulations to this, the guy that won. And he falls off the stage
Right.
and then gets up and like all the world is watching this. The entire nation, and he's just like, raw. Right. He's just this total drunkard.
How was that again?
Raw.
and that's the thing. The thing about it, you'd also learn at this point is Effie sort of says, "Yes, he's your sponsor, and he's going to train you in the ways of what to do when you get to the city." And they're like, "What? These guy's an idiot. He doesn't care about us at all." And so that, Craig, leads us into the pregame training, and so we meet.
Right.
So what happens when we get to the city and we start meeting people?
Well, it's very interesting because it's bizarre that people, you can tell that it's a very jaded society, and the people they've got like their genetically various colors. Like isn't one woman like green or blue?
Yeah.
They've got multicolored hair. They've got all kinds of piercings. They've got all kinds of weird fashion things going on. And one of the craziest is this guy Cinna, who's everyone he does both of them, right? I read it.
Well, no, he doesn't actually. There's a separate. So what happens
Cinna
is
and Portia, right?
Yeah. When you get there, there's a stylist, right? And their job is going to be to take the people from their district they're assigned to and make them look beautiful. Because basically, in my mind, I was thinking of the crazy Olympic opening ceremonies every country does, and they're so off the wall nuts. I'm looking at you, France. So they did the same sort of thing here, where there's going to be these crazy parades initially. So they try to come up with the most outlandish, wacky costumes to impress the people, and also the costumes need to be themed up to the district. And District 12 is generally considered, they're the loser district, they're the lowest of the low, and so they always get assigned some nobody. But this year, for some reason, they get Cinna and who's the other, the girl, the woman, Portia, and they're two designers out to prove themselves apparently. So Cinna gets assigned to Katniss, and Portia gets assigned to Petra, right? And
I felt like they were a team that was.
They were a team. They worked together, but I think they
team.
each are assigned to one person. I could be wrong, but I think that's how it worked. So, but they came up with coordinated costumes, and this is sort of neat. Here's where they start getting lucky, because these are two apparently the best designers ever, and
they're rookies.
They are rookies,
new.
right? So they got assigned 12 because they're new, but they have to prove themselves. So normally District 12, because they're cold, they're dressed in black, and they're boring. And this time, these two guys decide we're going to make it fire, because that's what cold does. It brings life to things. And so they got some special high-tech fire stuff that you could wear. And it looks like fire, it burns like fire, but it doesn't hurt you somehow. So their costumes were all aflame, and they were just the hit of the parade, and everybody loved them, and they were the talk of the event. And that's sort of how it starts going, and you start realizing that District 12 is just getting lucky or got the right people in a row, and they've actually going to have a chance here because the presentations are going very, very well.
And what they're doing to leverage that is that part of the plan is during one of the interviews with Cesar Flickerman, who is an awesome name, they realize PETA mentions basically that he's had a crush on Katniss ever since he was like 5.
Right.
And she thinks that this is just some play, because every time they interact, she's constantly thinking, I can't get close to this guy. I'm going to have to kill him, because I promised Prim that I would come home alive, so I have to do everything I can. Even though there's no chance I'm going to win, I have to kill him, so I can't get close to him.
Right. She's always in game face mode. She's never she's always thinking, he's trying to play me. How is he trying to play? This is Peter we're talking about. So she's trying not to, because remember, there's no teams in here. So this is all every man or woman for themselves. So she's definitely not on that path. And that's when the bomb drops in this one scene, right?
Right. So he says, they do an interview. She does okay in the interview, like way better than they thought, because she's very taciturn, very
tomboy, very
And he's like, he's more handsome, and so they're like, oh, we're going to play him up as this. But then it turns out that they strike on this, oh, he actually likes her. And they tell her, you have to play up that this is a romance. So, when they get even the flame thing, before they're even really aware of this, he says, you have to hold hands. Mm-hmm. They're going to show the shtick is that you're in this together.
Right.
And that you're in love. And that's what gets them. That's their angle as they play this throughout time. And part of it is based on what she thinks is fiction and what she thinks is political maneuvering on his part. And then we find out later is actually rooted in some sort of actual real feeling.
Well, I love this part, too, because it totally works in reality television or real life. Like, if there's ever, a Survivor episode where two of the members get married, which has happened before, they fall in love on the island, it's always, huge ratings, right? Because everybody's like, oh, it's a real love story. It's actually real on television. And so you could tell from the Hunger Games they never had that. That's never happened before. And so they're going with this, not so much a team, but it's a love approach. And they blindside Katniss on stage with this, and she's trying to react to it. And this is interesting, because as this is happening, I'm thinking to myself, why do they care? What's the point of this besides just making good ratings on television? And the motivation for the players we start to discover is, there's this concept of sponsors in the game.
Yeah, I love this.
This was brilliant. So the more sponsors you get, the more likelihood you'll receive aid during the game. So your sponsors can actually pool their money and pay for something to happen. And I sort of imagine it like there's this. They don't really describe how it works.
No, they do. There's silver parachutes.
No, that they do tell.
The
that's how it arrives.
How do the sponsors actually vote to what they get? I don't even know.
They tell that too. They work with Haymitch.
With Haymitch.
Haymitch controls what they get.
So Haymitch is sort of like the seer, and he controls exactly, and they give him the money. He kind of decides.
So imagine that it's like text in your vote, like who do you want to vote for?
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking.
But you're donating money, so you could have a really rich, like, oh, there's a billionaire. He likes this person. He's going to donate a bunch of medicine or food or whatever.
Right.
And then, this I'm going to save this for later. But remember that part where a bunch of people pool their money together for her. So there's this idea that anybody can kind of sponsor, but it's really expensive, and it starts out as not very expensive,
and then later in the games,
it's more and more expensive.
And the other thing that was a challenge for District 12 is because Districts 1, 2, and 3 are richer districts, they're wealthy, and they're also interested in their people winning. They're going to have wealthier backers, whereas they're starting in a huge deficit. So the fact that they can get out there and they can wow the crowd with these great costumes and have this romantic love story and all these things that Katniss starts to figure out, oh, I see what they're doing. They're playing this love story angle just to get better sponsors. She's still thinking Peter doesn't really like her.
Well, to begin with, they want any sponsors.
Right. They'll
because
take whatever
they're
they
like,
get.
we're such a long shot because there's a betting angle here, too.
Right.
They're betting on who's going to win, and they're like, well, I'm not going to sponsor. Like, I want to win this bet. Imagine a billionaire. He's like, I'm betting $15 million on this, and I want them to win. But that's never going to happen for District 12 because they're so terrible.
Right.
So in this case, they actually have an angle to go, oh, we're going to get this. But they're not even sure, even like 3 or 4 kind of iterations into this scheme, they're not sure they're actually going to get any sponsors.
Yep.
And so they try and go from nothing to any chance to survive.
Now, there's one other sort of big thing that happens in this stage of the book that sets up their sponsorship and their rate and their thing, and that is there's sort of 3 stages here. There's the costumes and the presentation. There's a training cycle that goes on, too. That's the other big thing. And what happens with this is they go through training. They get to try the different weapons out. Now, we know that Katniss is really, really good with a bow. That's how they talk about how she can drop a deer through the eye at 30 yards. Yeah. She's extremely good with a bow and arrow.
Not even more interesting, she consistently shoots rabbits through the eye because she doesn't want to kill waste the
damage the meat, right. So she's extremely good. And so they go to there's this scene where they have to go to they call them the game masters, and they have to do something there. We don't know what they're going to do. And when they do this, they're going to be given a rating. And this rating is going to indicate how well the masters thinks they are skilled at being able to do this game. And so you want a higher rating, and the better your rating, the more likely you're going to get sponsors because now you're sort of favored. It's sort of like putting the odds down in Vegas, right? With the over-under.
There's 2 parts to this. So the training is kind of public. Like everybody goes in and trains. Yep. And then the game master part of it is like their secret talent.
Their secret,
that only the game masters know. So you don't know what the talent is.
Right.
You just know this abstract number that like PETA got an 8. Why did he get an 8? We don't know. Like if you're outside the book, you don't know.
Right.
So she comes out of it like all the District 1, District 2, they're like, oh, he got a 7, he got an 8, and like somebody else gets like a 3 or a 2 or something. And then she comes out with what?
She gets like I think it's a 12, isn't it?
No, it's like
or 13 or 11. It's right. The max number is like a 13 or 12, and she's like an 11. She's like but she ends up being the highest ranked person. And we know what happened there because we're seeing the story through her eyes, and she describes the scene, which is this awesome scene with her getting upset. The judges are ignoring her. She's doing all these things. So she finally gets upset, and she shoots an arrow through an apple, like either in a judge's hand or next to him on the table.
I think it was on there's a pig on the table that has an apple in its
that's right.
mouth.
She skewers the apple to his mouth.
And then she just storms off.
Right. And she's mad, and she thinks she's totally screwed it up, and then all of a sudden her rating comes out, and it's like a 13 or whatever it is, a 12 or 11. And this is huge because everybody's trying to figure out what she did to impress them all, because she's this little girl from, and they've been dressing her as this very effeminate, very, trying to play up the whole I'm his girlfriend, boyfriend thing, sexy angle. And here she is. She's really this well done hunter, good marksman. But the problem now is she's going to need a bow to be able to pull this off.
Yeah.
And that's how we sort of enter the games. Any other part about that? Did we skip over anything, Craig, there in that section?
No, that was good.
The only other neat thing about that is that as they introduce the scores, you kind of get this is your competition.
Right.
Like, so-and-so gets this.
Right.
So
they're all knowing who to watch. That's the other problem is she's nervous because the book reminded me a lot, and I think it was informed a little bit by the Survivor show, because you sort of come into it knowing, okay, the people with the lower scores can probably glide under the radar. The high-level guys are going to be trying to, if they get that early opportunity to knock out a 9-rated guy or a 10-rated guy, they're going to do that. They may not, if 2 people split off, they're going to let the weedy kid get away for now.
So
I want to kill this other guy.
I won my game of Arcana the other day that way. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea.
And that's what makes this a great book for gamers, because there's so much. You can see the metagame going on here at all levels, and so you really can kind of see what's going on, in addition to the being horrified by what's actually happening, but you can sort of see the other craziness going on as well. There's a lot of game theory in the book. Actually, it's kind of interesting. She does a really good job, the author, of covering all those different angles and everything making sense and everything being balanced as to why you'd want to do certain things.
And this is absolutely inspired from Suzanne Collins' mouth she got the idea because she was flipping channels and she's like,
Survivor?
she was flipping reality TV and coverage of the Iraq War. And at some point she said they started blending together, and I got this idea for what if it was a war-torn, post-apocalyptic world, but there was also this reality TV element, and that's where she came up with it.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So the games start, Craig. Well, how do they start off?
You never know what the arena is going to look like, which I thought was a cool concept too. It's outdoors, but you don't know what kind of terrain is going to be involved. You don't know whether you're going to be dealing like in a desert or in ruins or on the coast of an ocean. And so basically what happens is everybody like comes up out of these super cool high-tech little personal elevator things that rise them up, and they're in the middle of a field, right?
Mm-hmm, yep.
Is that the first one, or is it the water?
No, they rise up in the middle of the field, and then I think they've got to decide. They're told
there's the cornucopia in the middle.
So that's the big thing in the very beginning. In the very beginning, they tell you that you're all coming up in these risers. You don't see the field, and you're spread out equidistant in sort of this giant circle, and then the center of the circle. There is going to be a cornucopia full with all kinds of great stuff, and then radiating out from the cornucopia are lesser and lesser things of quality.
Stashes
of stuff. So near you might be like, a spoon, and then a little bit farther away there might be a tarp, and a little farther away. So just imagine Survivor, the little rewards they get. There might be like flint and steel, and then in the middle there's actually a bow with arrows, and there's, which is what she wants. So maybe like a full tent kit. Remember, they're going to be out. These games go on for days and days, sometimes for a month. So they're going to be out in the cold, and Hamish is telling them the whole time, whatever you do when you do it, and by the way, we kind of skipped over this, but during the training, they grow to start respecting Hamish. You can tell he actually knows what he's doing.
Well, he makes a pact with them that he says, hey, I think you guys actually have a shot of living. I'm going to not be as drunk.
I think Hamish normally, he's had so many bad candidates that probably emotionally have scarred him. He tries not to get connected to them.
Think about this. You are a guy that killed 23 other people or survived that, right?
Right, yeah.
And then on top of that, you spent every year watching two young people that used to be you die.
I know, right?
Yeah.
How much post-traumatic stress disorder can you get?
And
Woody Harrelson?
Woody Harrelson, which I think is going to be awesome.
That should be cool.
That's
amazing.
Should be cool.
So that should be awesome, actually. And he tells her, they say to her, don't go for anything in the middle. Just run, find a safe spot with water, because the most important thing over the first few days, and just like Survivor, you need water. And but the problem is, she looks out there, and there's the bow, and there's like a little pack close to her. I can't remember the first couple things she buys, or she grabs, but basically she's like, I can't resist getting these couple of things. And she does go for them, and then she runs off.
No, she goes for them.
Remember, all those people are trying to kill you. It's not like, let's all grab some stuff and then run. It's like the big guy standing next to you sees you going for the bow. He's actually going to kill you.
And what happens is immediately she's like looking at Peeta, because you have to like stand. Right. You're held in place by a force field. Yeah. You can't move. And then
no, it's not a force field. There's landmines. The deal is if you step off the platform, mines will detonate and kill you instantly.
Oh, okay.
And then they deactivate the mines when they yell go. And the other big thing is during the whole part of the games, and this is a great plot device, and this solves the problem with the whole it's only from her point of view, is that there's this giant holographic projector system they can do in the sky.
The Caesar Flickerman.
And where the Caesar Flickerman is the announcer, and at the end of the day, they shoot up the faces of who's died today and stuff. So you're getting from her point of view, but you're still getting little updates of what's happening, what's going on in the gaming world via this projector
So
system.
she runs for this pack that's near her.
Yeah.
And she's looking at Peeta and like, oh, do you want to go? And he's like, don't go for the middle. Like he can see that she's seeing the bow and like, I want to take that. And she's like, no. And then she misses something because she basically is trying to figure out what he does. So she runs for this near pack. She gets at the same time as this other guy from like District 6. And he grabs the pack first and she's like wrestling with him. And then he just keels over dead because somebody else killed him.
Gets a knife through his throat or something. Because there's one girl that can throw knives really, really well. And she's like, whack. And he's like, oh, God. And she runs.
And she just takes off and like, I think she almost gets hit or something.
She's grazed, but she gets away.
Yeah, and so she runs, and then she runs away. There's a lake that's like you can see that's nearby, and that's where basically what they call what the hell are they? They call them, there's like a pack of tributes that are like, they team up.
Yep.
And they're all like, the alphas, that's it.
Yeah.
And they frequently do this, apparently, and they all team up, and they make camp by the lake, because it's a source of water. So she travels for like days. Like, she travels for like, it seemed like it was like 2 days before she's like, I'm almost dying of exhaustion.
I gotta get water.
I have to find water, and she's not getting And she's like, oh, the only way I'm going to survive is if one of my sponsors sends me something, right? Like, Haymitch has to be watching because everybody can see everything, basically.
Yeah, there's some kind of way that they can everything's filmable everywhere. So she knows she's on camera. She knows that Haymitch can tell exactly what's happening to her. And you're right. She's going along. She's like, I need water. Why won't Haymitch send me some water? But someone must give me a bottle. And then she starts figuring out that, wait a minute, if he's not sending me water, it must be for only one reason. I'm close.
Yeah.
And she starts to, and this is a cool plot point because she starts to get into Haymitch's head, and you can tell that he's able to guide her by what he does and doesn't send her throughout the game, which is a great, cool thing. And she starts to get that going on, and then she finds the water and she starts getting it on and starts getting her game on there. And we don't have time to go through every single possible scene here, but there's a couple key moments. Craig, what's one of your favorite moments in the games?
I loved the pack of genetically enhanced, like they were part wolf.
Yeah.
That's towards the end, right, where she's like, she's going back to the cornucopia is still there, but it's mostly empty now.
Yeah,
and so she's going back to try to get some medicine, and she gets chased by these wolves, and then all of a sudden she looks back and she realizes that they're not wolves. They're actually, what did they call them? Gen something.
Yeah.
They are mutants. They had some cool name for them that hinted that they were going to be worse than you thought they were going to be.
Right.
And they've used the DNA of all of the tributes that have been killed in this Hunger Games and evolved them into dogs, basically.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if they used their DNA if they actually were them. It was kind of weird. Well,
they're dead. So
but who knows? They could bring them about the life.
They're called mutations.
That's right, mutations.
Were they actually zombie forms in themselves, or they're breeding from their DNA?
The implication is that that she can see like their eyes. Like it's like she can tell that like they're trying to revenge themselves against them.
I kind of felt like it was them somehow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's what I got the feeling. It's a good debate. I don't know. I mean, because it seems like it'd be easy to do DNA, but I kind of got the feeling like it was somehow them. Like somehow they took their bodies and turned them into this and brought them back to life.
Or some sort of Frankenstein-like process.
Yeah,
or something.
I kind of got that feeling too. It was very disturbing, and it was like that scene right there. You jump to like one of the big final scenes where there's the three of them left.
Yes, there's what the hell is that guy's name?
There's Petra, there's her, and there's the one last kick butt dude from like District 1 or 2 or whatever it is.
Yeah,
and he's like fighting like crazy, and they finally
Kato.
Yes, Kato. And that's Craig. You're right. That was a cool scene.
Where basically that is so awesome because they have to basically they climb up on top of the cornucopia where these dog things can't get them.
Yeah.
And they're basically just like dying, they can't stay out here. But then Kato gets taken by them.
Yeah.
And he's killed, keep in mind, he's killed like the most of any of these people.
Right.
And these dog things, these mutations, start ripping him apart, but they don't kill him. They're like torturing him.
I know,
and
right?
she basically, at one point, she just like leans over, like PETA holds her over the edge, and she shoots him through the head to put him out of his misery.
Yeah, she does eventually get her bow, which is huge. And the other thing we should mention, though, another great plot device that was really well done, and it shows the cruelty of the Capitol, is that they went. So the game was every man for himself, every woman for herself. And then about 3/4 of the way through the games, all of a sudden, when people are hiding in their corners, they announce we're going to change the rules for the first time ever. You can win as a team from the folks from your district.
Right.
And it's because they have District 1 has Clove and Kato left,
right,
and District 12 has PETA and Katniss, and mostly it's because of that romantic relationship.
So there's all of a sudden they want to get them together, because right now they're separate. Katniss and Petra are separate. So all of a sudden they get back together, and they think we can win this together. And Petra's really badly hurt from earlier issues, and they try to win the whole thing together. But then at the very, very end,
they change the rules again.
What happens?
Ha! Now there's only two of you, and we're changing the rules back. You have to kill him because only one person can win.
So this is the big finale now. Big spoiler here, but of course we're spoiling like crazy. So what's the point? And I thought this is pretty cool. So they set the scene up, and Petra and Katniss are PETA. I'm thinking of Petra just for a minute. PETA and Katniss are standing back to back, right?
Yeah.
And they know they're on camera, and they're supposed to kill each other, and she had found some berries or something that were poisonous because someone else died eating them.
It's like
so she has these
hemlock or something.
Yeah, it's like hemlock or whatever, and it kills you quickly. So they said, okay, we're going to eat these on 3. Yeah. And so because they realized
commit suicide and nobody's going to win.
Right. And Katniss was banking on the fact that she'd kind of figured out this whole crazy thing was like they need to have a winner. that people will uprise and the town will be upset if there's no winner. So we want to. What do they do if there's no winner? The whole system is designed for a winner. It's all built around that way. Self-sacrifice would be too great of a symbol for the districts and all that stuff.
It's not like they can go back. There's nobody else except them alive.
Right. So they figure if we kill ourselves, she kind of says, "Trust me," and you kind of get the implication, at least I thought there was, that she knew they wouldn't let her do that.
Well, either that, or she said, "This will be such a blow to them that it'll be worth it if I have to kill myself."
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I liked.
Because she said, "Trust me," so I kind of got the feeling that she thought they might live through this. So she puts it in her mouth. She gets ready to bite, and then all of a sudden, what's his name comes on the air again?
Caesar Flickerman.
It says, wait, no, you both win. Huzzah. And so they basically broadcast on live television. They both get to win, and it's over, and they both collapse, and they get taken back to the city.
So I want to go to one thing before we wrap that up. So one of my favorite parts is Rue is this very small, quiet girl from like
She's
District 4 or something. Agriculture, basically. And she helps her in this way that she's like, she jumps from tree to tree as her like
Rue's
talent.
like a little nimble, a little monkey.
And she basically helps Katniss survive against this big group of alphas that's trying to kill her with their use of tracker jacks, which are hilarious.
Awesome,
So, but then she actually, through the course, they form an alliance. Rue dies. Katniss kills the person that kills Rue. And then shortly after that, she gets this silver parachute with just a loaf of bread. Now, she knows that Rue's district makes bread. That's what they do. And so she's like, this must have cost, because it's really late in the games, this must have cost like the equivalent of like years and years of multiple, regular people's salaries, effectively. Right. So much money. It'd be the equivalent of saying like, hey, this is like $1 billion to send this tiny loaf of bread.
Right.
And then
her whole district had to help.
Yes, right. And so she realizes who would send this to me, because it's not like it says from Haymitch on it. And so she realizes like, oh, this is from the people of District 12. And because she knows...
District 4.
Or District 4, sorry.
Right.
This is from basically the people of Rue's district.
11 or whatever it was,
because they recognize that she was actually respecting her and...
Yeah, because when Rue dies, Katniss like sings a little song to her and
puts flowers
on her. And she thinks that they won't actually broadcast that part because it's too... it shows too much... cooperation between the districts.
Right.
Yet they must have broadcast some part of it because that's when the bread comes. And she knows so much about bread, too, because Peeta's there. And because this is when she's taking care of him, I think, and he knows all about the breads, and he knows where they're from because he's a baker. He's a baker's son, so he knows all about things. Like this is from. So they kind of put it together and figure out and that was a really cool, powerful scene. I love that part too, Dan, where they really nailed that part. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Okay, so that was Rue, because we can't really miss. Can't
really talk about.
There's a bunch of other people that they killed.
There's a bunch going on. I mean,
cool.
and this won't. What's great about too is you haven't read the book, but you're kind of like, I'll listen to you guys talk about this anyway because I don't really mind spoilers. We wanted to kind of skip over some of the big scenes because that's obviously the movie I think is going to focus mostly on the combat. Obviously, it's a movie. I think you're going to get less of the intro and probably more of the...
Although Suzanne Collins is doing the screenplay for it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, that's a good sign. Yeah.
But I think that you can really go... So we get to the wrap-up of they're at the Capitol. Yeah. They basically won. There's these kind of big games. They do How long is that? Like, they review... It's like 3 hours long.
They do like a big... It's almost like, again, it's like the end of Survivor where they do the recap.
Right, yeah.
And it's like... But it's like a 3-hour recap of the games, and they show everything that happened. And then it's kind of interesting because it's sort of. I'm going to ask you guys about the ending. It sort of just ends, like
It's almost as if they planned it as a trilogy,
right? I mean, clearly they did because it's sort of like they cover nothing when they go back to the district. That they just like get on the train to go back, right? They don't even talk about what happens when they get back to the district.
Well, no, they do. Then not when they get. I think they mentioned something about the houses they're going to live in, but I think that's more a forward.
Talk about
thing.
It, right? But there's no actual like reunion with Prim or there's
Gale
reunion
or
with
anything.
Gale or anything. There's just and Peeta and her get back on the train and the end.
Because she wanted it to end on a down note, I think.
Yeah.
Because she wants it to pick up on the up.
Yeah, I haven't read the second one yet, so I don't know.
I haven't read it yet either, but that's my guess. Is that Craig? Have you read the whole series?
I have, yes.
Okay, so
were you pleased?
Was I pleased? None of them rise to the level of the Hunger Games. What's the next one? Girl
Catching
on
Fire.
Fire or Catching Fire? Catching Fire was good. It's very similar to the Hunger Games. So it's kind of like I went to the well again, sort of. It's a little bit different, so it's not as good. It doesn't have all the wow factor of oh my god, like this is all new, but it's still a pretty cool story. Same characters, same writing style, which I liked, And then the last one is very much where the teen angst really comes in, and I really was disappointed with the last book.
So maybe the last books, if you're a Twilight fan, you might enjoy that.
Exactly. That's exactly where it kind of went.
But this one is a great book. I really like this
it
book.
too.
And
so let's sum up. Duncan's going to kick us out here soon, so we'll skip all these bullets. But just,
I'm out of hot chocolate. So.
What was your final overall thoughts? Let's start with Dan. Dan, what's your final overall thoughts?
I really liked it. It was refreshing. So I'm still reading A Dance with Dragons. Because it's so dense, partly because I kind of lost it when I was moving for like a month and a half.
Well, that'll do it.
But then I got it back, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, I kind of just want to read Hunger Games because I was trying to do like one chapter and the other, and I would just be like, yeah, I could read that, but I could read Hunger Games. It'd be more fun to read. It very much reminds me of the feel of reading something light like Dresden Files, where it's just fun to read. Now, this was a more serious, somber tone, but it was also just enjoyable. The pace of it was very much I finished this. I'll just read one more chapter.
It is one more page, yeah.
And it's short enough. It's light enough. The pace is good. I just really liked it. I'm really interested to see how the rest of the kind of series goes as far as the overall narrative. But as far as this story, this book as a standalone, I really liked it. And I would recommend it to anybody that likes adventures or sci-fi or the idea that it's a young adult or juvenile fiction is. I mean, I'm not juvenile by any means, and I really enjoyed it. So I think that, I could see that, like, it's written to appeal to that, if you're a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old or whatever. But I think that it was just a very enjoyable, well-done book. It's not super deep, but it has lots of layers and lots of kind of cool things to, debunk or, that's not the right word, de-stuff, like unpack and think about.
Yeah.
And that's what you do in between readings. Like, I read a few chapters, and then, like, throughout the day, I'd be like, oh, I really like that. So really like this. I'd highly recommend it.
Cool. Craig?
That's exactly how I felt. I really, really, really enjoyed it. It's not dense like Dan said, but at the same time, it's got a lot to it. That there's a lot going on emotionally. I'm getting all engaged again just thinking about it and talking about Rue and talking about the end of the book and. It really was probably one of the highlights of my 2010 reading, really. One of my favorites from that year.
Yeah, I agree with you both. I just read it. It was definitely one of the best books I've read this year. And I really enjoyed it. I think there's nothing else really to add. You guys nailed it on the head. I really enjoyed it. I love how everything came together. I liked the whole scene. Nothing felt overly contrived or anything like that. And it did not feel derivative at all. It felt like a nice, fresh concept and idea to me.
There was some discussion about there was some 1999 book, The Something. This is on Wikipedia if you want to go look at it, and it basically said like this is a chapter for chapter clone of this book, and they just said, listen, it's not exactly a super original story,
right,
but it's told really well. That's the important thing about it. And so they said, listen, it doesn't really matter. Like the author says, I didn't know about that book at all, and they said, listen, it doesn't matter. It's a good story. So what if that story's just as good? Hell, I'm going to go read that book too.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if the execution's well done, and it is definitely in this book. The characters are interesting. You really want to know more. I highly recommend it. I think it's a great story.
Yeah. That other book's called Battle Royale.
Okay.
Yeah. So you had a little note here. It was like, what are your most favorite? We talked about some of those. What are your least favorite parts? I have a lot of trouble finding a least favorite part when I think about it. It's just like, there were some slow parts maybe or something. I was like, but it's just such a solid kind of package overall. It's these great little emotional nuggets that you get to experience and then recall as you talk about them and think about them. But there's nothing where it's like, there's no Torchwood factor where like some episodes of Torchwood are really bad and you're like, I really hate this part of this series. There's nothing like that in this. Now maybe I can wait until the third book to get that feeling. But if you're just looking at the Hunger Games as proper, I'll tell you this book is miles better than the Hunger Games game from WizKids. Do not get that. The first one, maybe the next ones are going to be better.
There you go.
But it was very encouraging after playing that very disappointing game before I'd read the book.
My only bad part, I thought the end left me flat. I thought I wanted a little more out of the ending, and I know you always leave wanting more, and it's great to get me to the second book. I just felt like I wanted a little more closure at the end. So, I'm disappointed now to hear that the other ends or the other books are less than stellar because I'm probably going to read them anyway just to do it. But
they might give you a better closure, though. I mean, Craig, you could speak to that. Does it, even though it might be annoying, it gives you closure?
Yeah, you need to keep. Yeah,
all right. Okay.
It's not going to be as enjoyable an experience, but you need to you need to keep going because at the very least those first two books are
All right, cool. That makes
very,
it better.
very complimentary.
But the ending, I think, works because of the beginning. So the beginning, we're like down in the dirt, and basically you've been on this huge wild.
You can't really
rush
go back
ride.
to the dirt. It wouldn't arc.
And now it's just like, hey, we want it to end on a down, kind of disappointing, subdued note. You're going back. There's nothing. There's no like, and then they get married. You know, it's
Right.
like, it's just like, no, listen, at the end, we killed a bunch of people. We survived. That's what matters. We're going back home.
Yeah.
But there's no jubilation about it because in the end, the Hunger Games are still a terrible thing. It's
Right.
a terrible world to live in.
right. Let me just, Craig, do you have any nits to pick, or are you good?
No, I liked it. I found the ending to be intriguing because I wanted to find out what happened next.
Yeah.
And so I enjoyed it a lot. I really liked the dichotomy of what was happening between Katniss and Peeta and his feelings versus her feelings. And in this book, it doesn't feel overly teen angsty. It feels like genuine, depth of emotion is it felt really strong.
Cool.
Then it gets teen angsty.
All right, so I think we're going to get kicked out of Dunks here. We're getting the evil eye now.
Yeah, it's
Dan's Munchkins are getting stale. So
Alrighty. Well, thanks for coming, Dan.
Yeah,
thanks for having me,
joining us,
guys. I appreciate it.
Hope you enjoyed your hot chocolate.
Oh, it was delicious. I'm glad I got a large. It lasted me almost the whole time.
Have
Hey,
one more
there you
Munchkin.
go.
Never throw a Munchkin away. That's
No,
like a rule. All righty,
right,
and that's
then.
the Hunger Games. Hope you enjoyed the book club.
Yum.
Thanks for purchasing a D6G Lost chapter. Supporting the show helps it grow.
Give me some noise, Craig.
Level and the Jets.
Nice. How long did you work on that one?
I just came up with it all of a sudden.
That's
It
pretty
was
witty.
better.
That's pretty.
It was
pretty
better
witty.
than. Look at that bodice. Oh, man, just look at that bodice. Oh, dude, just look at that bodice. It's so tight, they'll pop out.
Yeah, you working on that one longer? Because
A lot longer.
good. Okay.